well, how do you then play the game if it never ends?
Like that can be daunting to some people, right? Especially as we go through the ebbs and flows of life and the the peaks and valleys of business. I'm here with Ben Johnson, founder of Baker Street Strategies. Ben, please tell me, what is Baker Street Strategies?
This has been something that we get to co-define this year.
Yes, exactly.
Baker Street is a reflection of a summer I spent after selling my business. Is I wanted to stay in the entrepreneurial world, and I had two paths for me. One was to start new businesses, and the other one was to coach people. And instead, I decided to do both. And so I joke that I took too much from Roy Kent's character from the Ted Lasso, and I'm kind of going from captain to coach. And I think a big part for me is having been I am an only child, and having been a solopreneur, the idea of kind of growing a business on your own is maddening. And so I think the overarching theme of Baker Street is to be able to grow with people.
Right. So it's being an entrepreneur or a solopreneur. It's frightening and can be lonely.
Yeah.
So the idea is then that you come alongside with these with your clients, with small business owners, onto the entrepreneurial mind, and help them realize their potential.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like to your point, it's like them realizing their potential.
Yeah.
A lot of times the idea is like really not the point. And whether they're deciding to grow a small chain of coffee shops or financial advisory, and a lot of my background has been in agency side. So that's like a common trait of Baker Street clients. But the point of it is them kind of having that self-determination to grow. And I think you've seen it too from a coaching perspective, that how someone grows if they don't have someone beside them. I think a lot of us who are very high growth people can like, if I'm the one who's like holding out the yardstick for performance, I could be in the trap of nothing's ever good enough. Like if it's not growing, it's dying.
Yeah.
And that's usually a healthy spot to be in. But like if you get stuck in that without a sense of someone echoing back, providing sort of that like maybe a right size feedback. It's tricky is that you can't really get there with employees, right? If you're like, hey, how am I doing? And you could be, and even with ChatGPT, you can have a sycophant, right?
So coaching then, in your view, and you touched on a couple of points there, which I thought were brilliant. So the one thing that you really emphasize is being in, working with your client, as I've said before, coming alongside of them, being in their corner. So there's an element of performance coaching, yes, but that's its own genre in and of itself. So that's one element of it, but there's also, in working with your clients, a little bit more of a human approach. It's like, hey, like, you're never going perfection is not the goal. We want growth and we want you to achieve your goals, but we also want to take care of the human who's involved in this whole program too. It's not a, shoot for excellence and coming in second is failure.
Yeah, until we've kind of worked on that kind of maybe what might be holding ourselves back, whatever our own blockages are, you could kind of point out, the next step logically is increase your revenue.
Absolutely.
But unless they're kind of putting it and applying it, what are those things that are stopping someone from applying? So if you kind of step back and go like, okay, so it is the like either incremental, disruptive growth, optimizing things, like that will always be the case. If you never really have like an end, well, how do you then play the game if it never ends?
Like that can be daunting to some people, right? Especially as we go through the ebbs and flows of life and the the peaks and valleys of business. It's never a straight line up and to the right. We're always dealing with moments of evolution and revolution and places where we plateau and struggles that we have, and it seems to me that your job as a coach, or your role as a coach, is to meet your clients where they are in their entrepreneurial journey and to help them through. And every client is going to be at a different stage, dealing with different challenges. But we really have to understand it's not a formula, right? And there's no magic wands. It's really about meeting the entrepreneur, meeting the client where they're at and helping them go through what it is that they're going through. So the approach is very individual and singular, even though you're providing structure and systems, right?
Yeah. And when I touched upon earlier, like the the advantage that it's different than sports in that we age and we don't age out. In my hobby life, I'm a dodgeball commentator. And one of my jokes about it is like the leadership roles and commentary is something you age into.
Yes.
And so like most commentators are 60s, 70s, if not into their 80s. And their voice has got that gravity to it.
There's hope for me yet.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas like just talking to a client this, to start off the week even was, the idea we're both, making our way into our 40s, and that's the age in most sports where it's like, oh, it's unbelievable. They're still playing, at age 41. And so those roles, they have to transition to something else, like speaking of commentary, but also like, oh, I'm a gym owner now, or, they have like a car dealership and take on a whole new life. Whereas, I can imagine you can speak to this as much or more, is each kind of phases of our life, we have to adapt to different behaviors. And
absolutely,
one of the reasons for me to get into coaching was I have this experience of growing a business in my 20s and into my 30s. And it's very different kind of to think about it now. And like the energy that I had, like I was 24. And in where there's some skills you don't need if you're growing a business in your 20s. There's some skills you don't need if you're growing a business under $1 million. But like with a lot of the people that I'm particularly coaching, because I think you find it too, is like you find people in a coaching experience, they're kind of, when it's like one-to-one, they're kind of going on a journey very similar to you. And that's partly why like having some sort of guide is like, if I'm assessing it based on my past, like, oh, I'm not getting up, I'm not, like you can be condemning, right? Why isn't this working the way it worked before?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting and I love how you touched on the stages of life, because as you rightly pointed out, I am at a different stage of life. And each decade, I think it's interesting breaking it into decades, and also it's reflecting back, which I have some years to reflect back on now. It's not only a decade by decade thing, but you really can take that concept of first half of life and second half of life, and you're very rightly identified that when you're in your 20s, you've got a passion, you've got drive, you've got time, you've got ignorance on your side, right? Yeah. And you can just put your head down and make something work just by effort and applying your brain power and applying your passion and making it go. And again, as you grow and your business grows and as your life changes and you go through different life stages and your priorities might shift, it completely changes the essence of the game that you're playing. It's not about working harder. It's, using the old cliche, it's working smarter, not harder. Are there things that, we're able to do differently that are going to enable us to get to where we want to go, but not have to work those 15, 16-hour days, 7 days a week? We've talked a lot about your one-on-one coaching, but I'm very curious to learn more about this concept of the game as growth that you brought forth. Tell me about what the game of growth is. So
this was something that came about for me. I was kind of reflecting on kind of what, we talked about the one-on-one coaching. They tend to be people in a certain phase in their journey that you're willing to have someone one-on-one with you. And another example is like I have a personal trainer, right? And that is this has been a huge decision to prioritize my personal health. And yes, I could just go into the gym, but now I'm spending hundreds per month for someone to tell me to lift a weight and put it back down.
There's a bit of accountability there.
There's accountability there. And that person is particularly thinking from kind of next to next and kind of guiding me along. And the unfortunate part is, unless you do that, like you're completely unguided. And that was my journey for a full decade, growing a business from like 24 to 34, from nothing to self-employed contracts to a team of 24 plus growing to ultimately 30. And until I got to like the 2000 mark, I hadn't hired a coach. It's also, I had no particular vision for my agency.
Right.
Like the good news of it was very client driven, and taking care or care for employees. But there wasn't someone coming alongside me and going, "Are you sure? What about this?" And the moment I did, it was like a real unlock. A big part of the way Baker Street is constructed is that we have our kind of practitioner side, like that we are co-creating businesses, and then we're coaching. And so it's like, well, how do we kind of have this kind of third level where it's like we're opening the door to a wide group of people. It's easily accessible in terms of kind of costs, sort of things that you can join and just kind of be in a group that's constantly talking about the things that we think lead naturally to growth.
Great.
And if we talked about the accountability and that concept of not being alone, boom, like you're immediately not alone. And I think we're over investing in that concept of people. We talk about being seen and celebrated. And so even just to be in a group coaching environment is to like self-select as yourself of someone going like, hey, like I kind of want to have a sense of measurement of how I'm doing kind of thing. And what are the things I should be thinking of. And we talked about like that, like we learn more from, that kind of you learn by teaching or you learn by being in that sort of relationship is, I think it kind of forces our entire group to go like, what do we say that we know? But like to kind of expand it out beyond that is to like the structure of constantly thinking about strategy and marketing and kind of the data side of your business and kind of how to grow it yourself and your team. Yeah.
So there's a few points there. So one, the word that you used that I loved was accessibility. So Game is Growth is designed for people earlier on in their entrepreneurial journey, perhaps with smaller businesses, possibly younger from a chronological point of view, but not necessarily. Not necessarily, right? So for people newly in their journey who might have some questions as to what business coaching is kind of a nebulous concept. So hey, so let's create something that's accessible, that's a group orientation, that's and you touched on also on the notion of a built-in peer group as being a big part of it. So it's kind of like a business coaching 101. Let's get people in the environment, starting to talk about those concepts that are really important, and doing so within a peer group that makes them feel hopefully more comfortable.
Yeah, one thing that I mentioned, like that self-selecting part, is way we built into the schedule is kind of showing up is a big deal. You kind of like take the one hat, spin it around. You're now someone who's building your organization. Every other hour, you might lose out to the person who's operating it.
Right.
But in this moment, we're all showing up as builders.
Okay. So I'm getting out of my daily grind, all the firefighting, all the details that I'm stressing about. And I'm, for this period of time in the game of growth, I'm shifting gears and starting to work, using that cliche, working on the business. Getting a higher level purview and moving towards my own best use, higher purpose.
And it's like, and then I think a lot of us, when we're like new in a journey, like, what does it even mean to work on my business?
Yeah, no. What are you talking about?
Like, does it mean to work harder? Does it mean to like kind of push? And just even not knowing the kind of the levers that of like, if I want to be in growth mode and be building instead of just operating, if I just had like 90 minutes a week, what would I be spending my time doing? The advantage of a group coaching program, even sometimes compared to one-on-one coaching, is a little bit of a heavier hand of like, okay, let's think about this for the next while. And then we have a Q&A portion where someone could be like, hey, no, I have a very specific question of where I'm at. And it's just kind of knowing that each week that you could kind of go into a group, kind of bathe in the like strategy of growth, and then go, hey, actually do you have something I would love to speak to someone else about. And I kind of even like that that's sort of like more of a bonus than anything.
Yeah, for sure.
Because like a big thing that we've talked about in a lot of our content is like the mindset of growth. Obviously there's a literal term, growth mindset or abundance mindset and that sort of thing. But I think that's actually kind of hand in hand with like, how do I grow this organization? Especially if I'm more or less the technician in it.
Yeah. Okay. No, I love that. So this gives the people the opportunity for an hour and a half a week to step out of their daily responsibilities and details, move into a different mindset where they're learning and growing and focus on higher level concepts about how they can move themselves and their business forward. Yet at the same time, you mentioned that it's a forum whereby if I as a participant had a very specific question about my business, about a people issue, a financial issue, whatever it might be, I can fire that out there and get some response.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Great.
And I think the overarching theme is like people who either have kind of felt called to self-employment or they are self-employed and they're like, wait, that's not entrepreneurship. I think that's a big realization when people can start to separate the two. Like I've made myself a job. Now what?
Yeah,
I think that would be kind of most people that were around, even from a coaching capacity.
Absolutely.
And then the ultimate would be someone who goes, I want to build a sellable organization.
Right.
That's a pretty transcendent kind of feeling for someone to like, hey, I have an idea that one day might be someone else's owning kind of thing, right? The bad things are not a fit, or if like, well, I want passive income or I want to sell something, I just don't know what it is.
So we understand that the game is growth and that it is truly a game and it's a journey and it's ongoing, which I think is wonderful. And that, the game is growth as a group coaching program is meant to be an accessible format for many people to dip their toe in the water of what business coaching is along that journey. But I'm curious what if the game is growth, what do you mean by growth? What is it, and what is it that entrepreneurs struggle with along that journey?
Well, like on a basic level is like hitting revenue targets. But we've even talked to like Dan Martell's great line, that revenue is vanity, and then profit is sanity. So kind of learning margins, learning ratios is difficult. Cash is sanity. Access to money is difficult, especially if you don't already have it.
For sure.
That's kind of stating the obvious. Yeah. So like starting with those three things, it's just like, how do you learn the ability to convince other people to part with their money? Like when we talked about self-employment, is like you're usually transferring one way of making money, like when you were doing it on behalf of someone else and then doing it on your own.
Right.
That's not bad. I grew up with entrepreneurship as the pursuit of opportunity without regard to resources currently controlled. And so like to me, a higher level is like when you're like, hey, what if we sell this thing that hasn't previously existed?
Right.
That challenge of convincing someone to part with their money and like being able to impart vision. And you have to, as it grows, you have to be able to tell other people to do it on your behalf. And then that ratios and margins and understanding your business. And I think a lot of shoulds come into place, right? Like, oh, I know my organization should be making more, but what does that even mean? Like, what dial do I turn and what's acceptable and how do I hold standards to other people?
Absolutely.
That sort of thing. And then just the cash part is one of the things we don't realize as you're growing, that becomes a bigger issue.
Right.
Where it's like, if you had just enough for yourself, like we've seen books like Profit First come up where you kind of look at the number in the bank account and be like, where the hell's my profit?
Yeah.
And you don't know that like it really is a construct at a certain point.
Yeah. They're related concepts, but very different. And you're right. We tend to get lost in the income statement performance and we forget to understand cash. So we're talking about growth and then literally a participant in the game of growth is looking to take their business, their idea from where it is now to physically growing it financially. This is what
at the most basic level.
Yeah.
And then we kind of overlay that with fear, pride.
Yes.
Right? And so if my numbers are looking good and I've convinced people to buy my thing, all I just need to do is ask someone for hundreds of thousands of dollars and then go, now let's double our growth. But as we talked about, doubling isn't necessarily the same activity as your past, and a past performance is not an indicator.
Right.
And so you have to have this willingness to kind of like, if it feels like gambling in your body, or fear, and because it's our relationship with money. Like we can make a great decision and it could still have bad outcomes.
Absolutely right.
And so I think when the longer that we stay in entrepreneurship, there is that dealing with the fact that like luck is always with us, and that can be unnerving. And so asking other people to join you on a mission, asking people to lend you money, invest in it. So yeah, it's about revenue growth and being able to turn that into margins. But along the way, there's kind of trolls under the bridge. And so how do you address your fear or your pride of letting go and those sort of things, right? Because we talk about, say, like lending versus investment. Like if someone's going to get equity versus you're going to borrow. Cost and control is a technical term that's used. And it's like, as children, like, are we good at sharing? And so like, funny enough, that's actually the same concept kind of thing, right? So it's like, as much as it's about kind of hitting revenue targets, it is like pursuing this unknown. Absolutely. Hitting constant ceilings and walls, right?
So there has to be then, not only are you working with clients to develop the skills and the structures and provide tools to enable the growth and to enable to, hopefully to ensure that that growth translates into profit and positive cash flow, but it's also, like you said, a counseling component, helping people understand where they are potentially the barriers to that growth and how they need to let go of things and get out of their own way so that the business can flourish. Whereas most entrepreneurs, we want to control all the outcomes, right? As best we can. Great. Well, thanks, Ben. And I hope that it gives everyone a bit of a taste of what to expect in our conversation, where we'll talk about the entrepreneurial journey, Ben's philosophies and approaches to business coaching, and provide some tantalizing teasers and solutions for participants in the game of growth.